All right, so to start off, I'd like to know how you first envisioned your installation at the MFA exhibition. Where did that concept begin?
Whoa, that's a difficult question. I think maybe the beginnings are, it's all a bit feathered. It maybe started a long time ago, just in the fact that I've been painting. I was like an oil painter, almost entirely oil painting, for like 20 years or something to that effect. So I was really used to like working in a certain way, certain materials, certain mediums. And coming into the program in general, I knew that I wanted to kind of pivot and change the way that I function in my studio, and just the creative process in general. I'd been kind of exploring. That's been the theme of the entire MFA program is really kind of experimenting and exploring new things. So when I started kind of coming up with what I wanted my MFA kind of thesis show to look like, it it came in parts. It was very fragmented. It wasn't just like this vision that was laid out before me, and then I just kind of like made it work. It was definitely something that came together through research and through an interest in environment and in ecology, and wanting to maybe include that type of imagery and create a dialogue with my work along that lines. I mean, I think climate change is something that, we kind of have to start thinking about and dealing with. So when I started to like do my research, plants are this amazing ally that we have, and gardening or just plants in general are my second passion, other than like painting and drawing, and art. So I was looking obviously towards that imagery, and I've always liked, well, I guess just like some of the things like in the larger piece, propagating entities is fairly large. It's like 16 feet wide, and I think height it's around 17 feet. And I knew that I wanted to do something that had this imagery of like these masses with like kind of these long tentacles. And in like previous semesters, I had done stuff with like squid and octopus, and just like I had even looked into like all the synapses in like your brains, and they look very similar to like tree roots and stuff. So just like on an imagery, like constructing that imagery, that was kind of, this loose, idea that I knew that I wanted to kind of try to incorporate that. Aside from just maybe some of, the compositioning and stuff, a lot of the imagery developed over time through the research, and just getting really interested in, how plants function, how they particularly function with their surroundings and the mesofauna in the soil. So root systems became really interesting, and I like the idea of creating these oversized, kind of root system. I mean, I say oversized, and they're strictly just maybe oversized for some of the plants species that I'm using, in that work. There's, vast like root systems in nature and stuff, but I like the idea of having, imagery and root systems that kind of you look up at, and it's this elevation of the botanical world, and not something that's just in the background.
Yeah, and you mentioned in your exhibition statement that you have an interest in how natural systems act as models for sustainable creative making. So I
Mm-hmm.
was wondering what you believe has been the biggest lesson you've learned from observing environmental behaviors.
Oh, gosh, there's a lot. I mean, I'm kind of in the mind of like everything should be reframed and restructured around like the natural world. It's, been perfecting these systems for eons, just like millions and millions of years. So it's hard to kind of, at least in my thinking, kind of make something better. Um, I think for me, on just a very simple, I've looked at like, water cycles and nitrogen cycles and a lot of different, the soil food web, like that cycle of life and interaction. I think that is really important, but at the end of it, composting, I think is really interesting. That's such like a simple thing. I compost all the time. It happens naturally in nature. So looking at like the forest and the forest floor and how material is broken down and then brought back into the system, I think it's really interesting. Um, I think I'm really fascinated with just the transformation of materials, and that's what almost all of nature cycles do, is just transform matter, biomass, into another form of biomass, and then it's just cycled. So I think that is a particular interest to me, and kind of along the lines of maybe the heart of some of this work.
Yeah. And the next question you've probably heard plenty of times. It's, what do you believe your art offers to those experiencing it?
I have heard this question a lot, and it's always really hard, because what I experience and get out of the work is very different from what a third party is going to get out of. I would hope that they get something positive out of it for sure. I think for me, it's I hope they take away a desire to learn more about nature, to learn more about ecology, and how it can really benefit us. Plants are like the best chemists like ever. They just develop. That's how they function, and that's how they interact with everything. Is just through chemistry. So I don't know. I think that, to me, that's inspiring, because chemistry it's a very difficult subject, and then to kind of see these things that are just like all around us, kind of utilizing the world and all the things in nature to really create beautiful things. I hope people would take away a sense of interest in that, and then maybe an interest in reframing the way that they make things as well. I think a lot of art, and throughout art history, we've made things and it's coincided with technology, and that technology hasn't always coincided with nature. And I think we're to a point where we have the perspective to look back at, postmodern, modern, and going, I mean, honestly, going all the way back to like Renaissance work. I mean, they weren't really concerned about, oh, we're going to use too much, of this material, natural resource to make our work, and how is that going to affect, everything. I think that, I think now we're kind of just at a time where we can have this a critical lens on the way that we've assumed to function, because it's how we functioned in the past, and maybe hopefully the pieces that I have at least spark the dialogue. If it doesn't like converse all of it, maybe it's just like the conversation to get people to start reframing, maybe the way that we think about possibilities.
Yeah. And is there anything else regarding your work in the exhibition that you'd like to share that I've been asked about?
Gosh, there's so much, to be honest. It's not a lack of answer, it's just kind of being overwhelmed. And I think I would definitely like to share just like, this work it's really just like snippets of this like research. Like the way that I process like everything is kind of through like drawing and painting, whether I was gonna put it up in an exhibition space, or I'm just doing it in like my basement or something. Like that's just kind of how I like receive information and process it and retain it and sometimes communicate it. Um, you know, and I hope that, you know, again, that this isn't work that just says, this is how we should all function. This is what art should look like. This is like how everyone's studio practice should like, play out. I think it's really, I'd like my work to really just spark that, that idea that maybe we can reframe the way that we do things. That kind of ties back in to some of the other stuff, but and learn about, I think everybody should garden. I think that's an amazing thing. And I think learning about soil, that's not something I put, spend loads of time, talking about maybe in my artist statement and stuff, but I think it's absolutely fascinating what goes on around us that we can't see. A lot of, the things we rely on just to exist relies on these very microscopic kind of entities that interact with one another in very complex ways. And I think just having that understanding, even if it's just a very brief understanding, I think that in and of itself can kind of open up a whole new world for people. So I think that maybe that's something that the work doesn't articulate super specifically, and my artist statement might not emphasize it too much, but I definitely think soil life and mesofauna is something everyone should be talking about.
Do you have a favorite thing to plant in your garden?
It's also a good question. That's a hard question.
I just wanted to know that one. I'm just curious.
It's hard to just say one thing, because I think that's one of the beautiful things about nature, is that it really thrives when there's multiple things. So I think I love like growing like tomatoes, but even though they don't always turn out super well, but I love to grow them because they're like surrounded by like marigolds, right? And basil and fennel is neat. It doesn't like any other things. It's a totally different plant. Fennel likes fennel, but fennel is also maybe just a spectacular vegetable that is underrated. It's kind of a guardian plant too, because you can plant it along the borders, and it actually exudes chemicals essentially into the soil. It's called exudates, that repels like other types of plants. So you can kind of plant it as a border, so it like kind of keeps some things out, and they're fantastic for like pollinators and stuff. So that's always fun.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one last question before we go. Are you currently working on any new projects that you'd like to share?
I just hung my show at the museum a couple days ago, and I am thinking and starting to do more work, but I haven't. There's nothing to the point where it's way down the road. I definitely like collage and watercolor. Collage is really interesting because it is like my studio floor becomes like the leaves, or it feels like the forest floor, because all the paper cuttings and stuff just like are like the leaves. And I don't know, I'm gonna do more collage and composting. So like that's something that I think is really interesting. And I'm working on sketches for like additional watercolors right now. Collage to me is maybe a little more refined imagery, whereas like drawing and watercolor is just like my right now very like my go-to. And that's like kind of sketching and brainstorming. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's more like drawing in watercolor, still working with like plant imagery and stuff, just because that's, fun to me. But then eventually I'll kind of be doing more like collage as some of those newer ideas develop.
Nice. Well, thank you so much again for your time today. You can see Perry's work on view in the MFA exhibition through May 7th, 2021.